This is the end of the line, a place where men are buried alive, locked away with no escape, a fortress of steel and stone, built to hold the most dangerous minds in America. Here, the walls don't just confine, they crush. No windows, no voices, no touch. Days, months, years blend into one endless sentence. ADX Florence, the prison that was supposed to silence the worst of the worst. A place designed to erase power, to strip away influence, to sever every last connection to the outside world. But inside these cells, behind soundproof walls, the Mexican Mafia still moves like an invisible hand. The rules don't apply to them. Even in total isolation, their power does not die. Their reach does not weaken. Their orders still carry weight. Their names still command fear. Tonight, we count down the 5 most dangerous members of the Mexican Mafia locked inside this prison. Men whose words are sharper than any blade. Men who have turned cages into war rooms. Men who are feared not only by their enemies but by their own. And at number 1, even his own men were afraid to cross him. These are not ordinary criminals. They do not beg, they do not break, they do not stop. Even from behind bars, they are still in control. ADX Prison, the most secure prison in the United States. A place built for those too dangerous, too violent, too uncontrollable for anywhere else. It was designed with one purpose: to break the worst of the worst. Some call it the Alcatraz of the Rockies. Others call it something else. A concrete tomb, a place where time stretches endlessly, a prison where no one escapes, not the body, not the mind, not the soul. Here, isolation is absolute. Inmates spend 23 hours a day inside a small, reinforced cell. A steel door separates them from the rest of the world. There are no open bars, no opportunities to see another face. Even their 1 hour of freedom takes place in a cage, alone. Conversations are rare. Human touch, almost non-existent. The soundproof walls make sure of that. If a man screams, no one hears him. If a man begs, no one answers. Surveillance never stops. Cameras capture every movement. Guards observe from a distance, monitoring inmates who are never meant to walk free again. Meals arrive through a small slot in the door. Books, if allowed, are inspected page by page. Letters are read, censored, or never delivered at all. Every word, every movement, every possible connection to the outside world is controlled. But even in a place like this, power still moves in the shadows. Rules are written on paper, but inside these walls there are other rules. Ones that no guard enforces, but every inmate understands. The Mexican Mafia, known as La M, does not operate within the limits of these walls. It does not operate within the limits of these walls. It exists in silence, communicating in ways that go unnoticed. Messages hidden in legal documents, orders passed through coded letters, smuggled notes so small they fit inside a matchstick, a simple gesture, a slight nod, a coded phrase. All of it can mean life or death. No matter how high the fences, no matter how thick the walls, La M finds a way. They control drug distribution. They decide who lives and who dies. They reach beyond the prison gates, sending orders to the streets, running operations from a place where no one is supposed to have power. Some of the most ruthless members of La M are locked away here. And at number 4, a name that carries weight, even among the most hardened criminals. Silvestre Mayorki Rivera, a name that carries a weight heavier than the steel bars that now contain him. He was never meant to be anything but dangerous. From the beginning, his path was set. Raised in an environment where survival meant dominance, he learned early that fear was a weapon and power belonged to those willing to take it. He wasn't born into the Mexican Mafia, he fought his way in, proved himself, became someone others listened to, someone others feared. His rise through the ranks was not quick, but it was relentless. Violence wasn't something he avoided, it was something he embraced. It was how he settled disputes, how he made a name for himself, how he earned respect. His first known crimes were brutal, murders carried out with precision, extortion operations that left no room for negotiation, drug trafficking routes secured through intimidation and bloodshed. He didn't hesitate. He didn't second-guess. He made sure every action sent a message. Before he ever set foot in ADX Florence, Rivera was already controlling operations from behind bars. He understood how the system worked, knew its weaknesses, used it to his advantage. Prison didn't slow him down. It gave him a new battlefield. He ordered hits without ever stepping outside, coordinated drug movements with messages so well hidden, authorities struggled to decode them. His influence extended far beyond the walls that were meant to contain him. When he was transferred to ADX Florence, some believed it would be the end of his power. But Rivera was not the kind of man who disappeared easily. The isolation was meant to silence him, but reports suggest otherwise. Intelligence agencies uncovered coded communication linked to his name, messages passing through channels that should have been impossible. The methods? Almost impossible to trace. The results? Deadly. Inside ADX, he maintained order the only way he knew how, with violence. He had no patience for weakness, no tolerance for betrayal. When someone was labeled a traitor, there was no debate, no second chances, only consequences. In a place designed to break men, Rivera made sure no one forgot who he was. But Rivera was just one piece of the puzzle. The next man on this list didn't follow orders. He gave them. Richard Santiago, a name whispered in corridors where power is measured in fear. He wasn't born into privilege, nor was he given many chances. The streets raised him. The code of survival was all he knew. From an early age, crime was not a choice, it was a way of life. It was the only thing that made sense. The only thing that promised anything close to respect. He started small, as most do. Petty theft, street fights, running errands for men who barely noticed his existence. But Santiago paid attention. He learned fast. He studied the way power moved, how respect was earned, how control was taken. He knew that in a world where weakness meant death, the only way forward was through force. He wasn't reckless. He wasn't impulsive. He was patient. Every move had a purpose. Every action a step towards something greater. His loyalty to the Mexican Mafia was never questioned. He did what was asked, no matter how brutal. He carried out orders with precision, making sure no loose ends remained. That kind of commitment does not go unnoticed. And it wasn't long before he wasn't just following orders. He was making decisions, controlling who stayed, deciding who disappeared. From behind bars, Santiago became more than a soldier. He became a strategist. Prison was supposed to weaken him, but it became his headquarters. He orchestrated violent gang wars from a place where men were supposed to have no influence. He didn't need to be on the streets to control them. His name alone was enough to start a war. Drugs, weapons, information, if it could be moved, he had a hand in it. Smuggling wasn't an operation, it was a system. A machine running so smoothly that even prison walls could not stop it. And inside ADX Florence, the impossible became routine. Corrupt staff, hidden shipments, coded messages. Every detail carefully managed. Violence followed him wherever he went. His presence alone was a warning. Attacks on rival inmates were not random. They were messages written in blood. And when officials tried to track how orders were being sent, they found themselves years behind. The codes he used took time to break, time they didn't have. Santiago made his mark through control, through understanding the rules and bending them to his will. But our next entry, he built an empire within a prison. Even in ADX Florence, violence doesn't stop. The prison was built to break the worst criminals, to strip them of influence, to make them disappear. But inside these walls, power doesn't fade, it waits, it adapts, it moves in ways no one can see, controlled by men who refuse to be silenced. The cells are locked, The doors are sealed, the surveillance is constant, but still the orders go out, the debts are collected, the punishments are delivered. Inmates are supposed to be cut off from the world, they are supposed to be forgotten. But the reality inside ADX Florence tells a different story. Some men have more reach behind these walls than they ever did on the outside. Their words carry weight, even when spoken in whispers. Their presence is felt, even when they remain unseen. A nod, a look, a single sentence, enough to decide who lives and who does not. For most, prison is an end, a place where their power fades, where their name is erased, where their influence is lost. But for the men on this list, it was something else. A new battlefield, a place to build something stronger, a world where control is measured not in territory, but in loyalty, where violence is not random, but precise. And as we move higher on this list, the level of brutality only increases. Manuel Tati Torres, a name that carried weight long before he was locked away. He wasn't an ordinary enforcer. He wasn't a man who took orders without question. He was the kind of person who made others hesitate, who made others think twice before speaking his name. Torres didn't climb the ranks of the Mexican Mafia by waiting for opportunities. He took them. Violence wasn't a last resort for him. It was his introduction, his method, his answer to every problem. Those who opposed him disappeared. Those who betrayed him suffered before they did. His reputation was built on actions that could not be ignored. No hesitation, no second chances, no mercy. He became more than an enforcer. He became a leader, a shot caller, the kind of man whose influence didn't come from how many men he had under him, but from how many men feared crossing him. He was responsible for some of the most high-profile assassinations ever ordered from behind bars. Targets didn't matter. Location didn't matter. If Torres wanted someone gone, it happened. Drugs, weapons, money, none of it moved without his approval. Inside ADX Florence, he should have been powerless. He should have been contained. But even here, he controlled the flow of drugs, deciding who profited, who paid, and who lost everything. He had connections. People on the outside, people on the inside. Men who owed him, men who feared him. Even in the most secure prison in America, he held control over an empire that never stopped growing. Investigators spent years trying to piece together his network. They believed he was responsible for multiple inmate stabbings inside ADX Florence, though proving it was another matter. The violence was precise. The attacks were carried out with a level of coordination that should have been impossible in a place designed to prevent any form of communication. Yet somehow his reach never weakened. Coded messages hidden in legal documents passed through channels that officials struggled to intercept. Every instruction disguised, every order buried under layers of deception. He didn't need to be seen. He didn't need to be heard. His influence was enough. As feared as Torres was, the next man on this list had a level of brutality that made even hardened criminals uneasy. And that brings us to the most dangerous Mexican Mafia member ever locked inside ADX Florence. Adolf Reinoso, the most feared name on this list, a man whose reputation was built long before he ever stepped inside a prison cell. He didn't stumble into the world of crime, he was raised in it. Violence was not something he learned, it was something he knew, something that surrounded him, something that shaped the way he saw the world. From a young age, he understood one thing: fear was power, and he knew how to use it. He was never the loudest, never the one looking for attention, but when he acted, people listened. He moved through the ranks of the Mexican Mafia with a speed that others couldn't match, not because of connections, not because of loyalty, but because of what he was willing to do. There was no hesitation, no room for weakness, no second chances. Reinoso was ruthless, and that ruthlessness made him untouchable. When someone needed to be eliminated, he made sure it happened. When a message needed to be sent, he made sure it was understood. The brutality of his actions sent shockwaves through the underworld. Even among men who had seen it all, his name carried a weight that made people stop and think before speaking it. Authorities believed that locking him away in ADX Florence would be the end of his power, that in a prison designed to break the worst criminals, he would finally be silenced. But Reinoso was not like the others. For him, prison wasn't the end. It was an opportunity, a place where he could operate without distractions, a place where he could focus, a place where his influence would not weaken, but grow. Inside ADX, he didn't slow down. If anything, he became more dangerous. The isolation, the lockdowns, the heavy surveillance, it didn't matter. His reach extended beyond the walls. Orders were still sent. Assassinations were still arranged. His name still commanded fear. Some say he controlled his own men through intimidation. Others say he didn't need to, that his presence alone was enough to keep everyone in line. No one questioned him. No one crossed him, because those who did never got the chance to regret it. Reports from prison officials suggest that at one point, a kill list was found hidden in his cell. Names, targets, people who had wronged him, people who had betrayed him, people who would soon disappear. It was proof that even in the most secure prison in America, he was still in control. Among all the men locked away in ADX Florence, Reinoso stands alone, feared by his enemies, respected by his own. A man who turned a prison cell into a command center. A man who, even in complete isolation, never lost his power. Even in a place built to break the most hardened criminals, the Mexican Mafia finds ways to survive. Walls are meant to keep them in. Isolation is meant to strip them of power. Surveillance is meant to prevent their influence from spreading. And yet the truth remains. Control does not always come from the outside. Sometimes it moves in silence, hidden in the smallest gestures, the briefest messages, the names spoken in hushed voices. For years, authorities have fought to contain these men, locked them away in the most secure facility in the country, cut off every possible connection. And still, their influence lingers, their orders are carried out, their names still hold power. Some say the system is failing, that no matter how many security measures are put in place, the Mexican Mafia will always adapt. Others say this is simply the reality of organized crime, a force that cannot be erased, only controlled. So what do you think? Should ADX Florence have even stricter security measures? Is there a way to stop these men from operating behind bars? Or is this prison, no matter how strong, no matter how isolated, simply another battlefield in a war that never ends? Tell us your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more deep dives into the criminal underworld, make sure to subscribe, because the world of organized crime is far from over, and some stories are too dangerous to be ignored.